Welcome to my review of Little Samson for the NES. Now, this game is known pretty well for how expensive it is to actually purchase a physical copy, but aside from that, I don't see a lot of coverage of the actual gameplay, so I wanted to cover this game because I think it's among the best games on the system for sure. This was one of the first games I played on emulation. I played it on an emulator probably in maybe 96 or 1997, and I believe I played it on Nesticle. It was an old-ass fucking emulator, a long time ago. I was using either the keyboard or the Gravis pad, which was a really shitty gamepad, but there wasn't a lot of ways to set up gamepads and do all that shit back then. But I remember I beat the Japanese version of this game called Lickle, and I thought it was awesome. And of course, it was amazing back then to be able to play NES games and shit like that on a PC. But more recently, I did a tutorial on this game and I completed the American version, which is a harder version of the game. So I'm going to post a link to the tutorial in this review, so check that out if you're interested. But yeah, in this game, it's really well designed around the mechanic of being able to switch characters at any time, and they all have separate health bars. Some of them can take more damage, some of them die faster. Like this mouse dies very quick, but it can climb on walls and drop bombs. The golem can walk on spikes, has a very powerful punch, and he has a high defense, so he can take a lot of damage. So there's all these different characters. There's, I believe, maybe 4 different characters. There's the dragon, the human, the mouse, and the golem. The dragon can fly. So they all have these unique abilities. And it's very useful. You're going to see me switching characters a lot at certain parts. Also, to survive, when you're fighting bosses a lot of times, you'll start with one character, but when his life bar gets low, you want to switch out to the next character. That way you can stay alive. So that's part of the game. The game does have passwords, so you can always start back at the beginning of the last stage you got to. And there's unlimited continues, of course. So it's a game that you will learn eventually. But it can be pretty challenging. There's a few parts that are quite hard, but it's really, overall, the game is not super hard, but there are a few parts that are quite difficult. But it's a great game. It has some of the best action on the system. Awesome boss fights. Usually multi-form boss fights a lot of times. The visuals are among the best. The music is top-notch. I assume that's the reason that the physical version of this game is so expensive, is because it's actually an awesome fucking game. It's one of the best games on the system. But it doesn't get talked about too much for that reason. It usually just gets discussed in videos that I've seen. It usually just gets talked about for the price, and they don't really talk about the gameplay too much. I mean, a lot of these fucking collectors, I don't even know if they play a lot of the games because, like I said, they don't seem to discuss much about the actual gameplay or go much in depth with it. But yeah, the dragon, he has homing shots too, so there's life upgrades that you can get, so sometimes you want to switch out to a different character to pick up a life upgrade and extend that character's life bar. I don't remember if the life bar upgrades are permanent upgrades or if they're just temporary until you lose a continue. That I don't remember. This was a while ago that I beat it, but I can tell you that it's an awesome game. And sometimes you get potions. Now you see this golem does massive damage with his punch, and you see me switching characters rapidly. So when the boss goes off in the distance, I switch to the dragon for the homing shots. But when I get a chance, I switch over to the golem to get some punches in. So there's a lot of variety in how you swap characters out. The potions will restore your health, I believe, when it's fully gone. You'll get like a revive, basically. So here I'm just showing some boss fights back to back because it's one of the cooler parts of the game. The boss fights are really nice, really well done. And you see a nice variety of character swapping when I play these bosses. And of course, you don't have to swap out characters in a lot of these fights, but I just found it more effective when I was playing. Those are the strategies I ended up using. And I'll show a little bit later also some tricky platforming parts where you really have to switch the characters out to get to do different sections. The game really it doesn't just have the characters there for show. It's really well designed that the game makes you use all the different characters to pass certain parts, so it's all very well integrated into the game. That's one of the things that makes the game so good, is that it's just so well designed. So here you see me using the mouse to climb up this wall and get the one up. But I quickly switched that out because the mouse dies extremely fast. So now I'm using the golem for this part, and he can kind of punch his way through here, but he is sluggish. But he can absorb a lot of damage, so sometimes I like using him just to take some hits. And you see I'm getting a lot of my health back, so I'm just kind of busting through. But you're going to see me switch over. Now I'm using the dragon to fly past some of this bullshit. So you see a nice mix of different characters I'm using here. I believe the dragon has to land ever so often because it runs out of flight time. But as soon as you touch the ground, your bar recharges fully. I think it's an invisible flight bar, though. I don't think it shows how much flight you have left. But you get a feel for it after a while. And you see I'm using a pretty nice mix here. This is one of the hardest sections. And you see I'm using a nice mix of switching different characters. And the game really forces you to come up with different strategies and use all the characters. It's one of the things I really like about the game. And yeah, basically what you see is what you get. I mean, this is the game. This is how the game is. It basically has passwords, unlimited continues. And, you just have to work on the stages until you find, the path that works best for you. Eventually you find a good way to proceed through. It's probably an upper moderate difficulty. It's not an easy game. But it's maybe in the upper moderate. It's not really... It's never too hard, you know what I mean? But there are a few parts that are quite difficult. Like that part that I just beat, that was a hard part. But most of the game is not on that level of difficulty. See, the mouse, if you use these bombs with the mouse, it does massive damage. But he dies so fast. So see, he almost died, so I had to swap out to another character. But sometimes you may want to use the mouse to do some nice damage before you switch off to a different character. I believe his bombs do the most damage in the game, and speedrunners actually use that mouse and don't swap out. They just keep the mouse on for the bosses, I think. But if you're playing the game normally, you may just want to use the mouse to do some nice damage and then switch out. You have a lot of options. The cutscenes are very well done, just like Ninja Gaiden on the NES. You have similar style cutscenes like that. But not nearly as long. It doesn't have any lengthy cutscenes. Your regular character is kind of just balanced all around. He can do some wall jumps. And, he just has a straight firing shot, but he's decent. But most of the time, you're probably going to want to use one of the other characters because they're usually better for a lot of parts. So here you see another boss fight. And, sometimes using the default human character is a good choice initially. So you really want to, feel it out for each situation, see what works best for you. But I mean, that's what gives the game a lot of depth and makes it stand above a lot of action games on the NES. Is that all the characters play really great, really fluid, and the game really forces you to adopt different strategies and switch out characters. It gives the game a lot of depth, especially for someone who's doing a speed run. I mean, if you take this game real serious, you can put a lot of time into this game just trying to figure out different strategies, more effective, faster methods, and things like that. So the game has a lot of replayability if you're into trying to optimize your runs. For me, I just beat the game normally, but I really enjoyed it. And these are some of the later areas that I'm showing now, and I am going to show the final boss, so be aware of that. I usually show it in most of my reviews. Final bosses are usually a good indicator of of how the game concludes, and they usually force you to use a lot of different skills and stuff to beat them. So I like to show them most of the time, but I'm still early on in doing these reviews, so if it's something that people don't want to see after a while, then I can always not show the final bosses. So yeah, the game really gets you to try out your different characters. The golem is usually one of my favorite to use because you can get up close and just absorb damage and punch the shit out of the boss and do a lot of damage. Sometimes you can pull a lot of bullshit with that technique. But a lot of times the bosses will kind of get around that, so you do have to mix it up usually. But, after practicing, I found what characters work the best for each form, for me anyway. Some of the bosses are repeated. There's like a boss gauntlet near the end of the game, I believe, that repeats a lot of the bosses, which is common with a lot of these games. So there's some reused content with that, but I mean, a lot of these games did that. See, the golem, is great for the spikes. He can just walk on that shit. And they really force you to switch up your characters a little bit here with the mouse because you can get through that little small opening. And the golem walks on the spikes. It's a simple segment, but it's kind of a cool little escape sequence after you beat the boss. Plus you get the benefit of, having all these different health bars that you can fall back on. So by switching to the other characters, you can live a lot longer. So now I believe there's a final little fight here with the final boss form. I believe you just have to push him off the ledge, if I remember right. Or maybe it's an automatic scene. I don't know if you even have to fight him for that. But either way, it's a very cool ending to an extremely good game. So yeah, I'd give this game a 9 out of 10. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.